Okay, here we go. Welcome, everyone. This is a Gearbox News Network broadcast. I am Dave, and today we're going to be talking about Gearbox and new IPs. So, I'm going to wait just a little bit to get started here. So first, let me talk about how the last game went. The last new IP for not Battle, words. What I'm trying to say. Let me turn that off. No, this is still bitter. Gooder isn't a word. Better is the word I was thinking of. Okay, so back on track. The last thing, you've sounded the alarm. Thank you. So hopefully that'll bring in somebody. Because last time I couldn't tweet out when I was going live because I was going live. So it helps. Appreciate it, Mags. Anyway, back on topic. Gearbox didn't fare very well with their last new IP, Battleborn. I mean, it sold well. Like the game at least broke even from what I've heard. From what Randy Pitchford has said, the game met their expectations, or at least their standards. The player base just didn't stick around after the game launched, so that's kind of a problem. Because Gearbox, in considering whenever they're wanting to make a new game, like that isn't Borderlands or isn't Battleborn or isn't Brothers in Arms, isn't one of their known franchises, they're branching into new territory. So something they have to consider is, will the player base stick around? Is it going to be another flop in that sense? I'd also like to bring up that Brothers in Arms was a relative success. I don't know the sales figures for that game, but it performed pretty well comparatively with Call of Duty and, what was it, Medal of Honor at the time. Thank you. So Brothers in Arms was a relative success. It did pretty well, and it was a new IP with one of their first IPs actually, and that performed pretty well when they took a chance and they made it on their own. They went out on their own and made the game that they wanted to, and they had relative success. So we can also see a modern example of branching out is Obsidian. Obsidian Entertainment is now trying to get back the Fallout audience. And there's other studios like Bethesda and who else is creating new IPs? There's a lot of indie games, but I'm looking more in the AAA space. Does anyone, Mags, do you know any new examples of like new IPs that are coming out? Like Bethesda's, what was it, Starlink? And they had two. Could have sworn they had two. Anyway, my example with Obsidian is their new game Outer Worlds, which I'm actually looking forward to as someone who wanted to get into Fallout but didn't. There's also the question of will they have 2K support, or will they have to self-publish? Or will they want to self-publish? Will they want to stop partnering with 2K for new IPs? That's something to take into consideration here. Are they going to self-publish their own games now? Because we know that they have a publishing branch and it's relatively successful. I mean, We Happy Few did fairly well, even though some people say it was kind of a buggy game. It looked pretty cool. I never played it, so I can't speak from experience with that game. And I also don't have that much experience watching people play that game. So Are sequels more likely than new IPs? I definitely think so. I wrote it down on my little cheat sheet. That sequels are definitely more likely than new IPs because it's guaranteed money. There's brand recognition. It's an easier investment to make. Uh, but there are also pros and cons to consider when making a new IP, especially in the AAA space. Like the pros are, it's refreshing. It's something new, something hopefully innovative. And there's also a potentially new market out there. Like with Battleborn, they attempted to go into the MOBA space and try to bring in people that like MOBAs. Like with Borderlands, they tried to get people that liked RPGs, like Diablo, which was a huge inspiration for them. And I say that they did both pretty well. There's also a potential to outsell your other titles because it's just something that people resonate better with or like the style of more. Like a good example is Gearbox. Like Borderlands just blew out of the water compared to Brothers in Arms, and that's coming from Gearbox themselves. Although there are some cons to new IPs, it's extremely risky, it's a potential flop, and it could affect the reputation of the studio depending on how well the launch goes and how well the new game's put together. Although I have to say that that last point could affect the reputation of the studio. That could also apply to sequels of games. A good example of that is Fallout 76, which every single video I've seen is bad news. And another con is that it costs a lot of money. It's a big investment to make. And that's not just financially, that's like morally on the staff who've been used to making, say, like at Gearbox, they got used to making Borderlands. They got specifically used to making Borderlands from 2009, or even before 2009, whenever development started on the original Borderlands game, which was around, I think, 2006 or 2007. I think that's my guess, and I'm sticking to it. To the very last DLC for Borderlands 2, I think, because 2K Australia made Borderlands the pre-sequel with Gearbox's help. So I wouldn't really call the pre-sequel a Gearbox Borderlands game that they helped make. They started working on Battleborn, which is a completely different approach to the game, or to a game. And that costs morally on people. Like, I'm sure there were staff that liked working on Borderlands, got used to working like in the rhythm, the pace, the gameplay, everything associated with Borderlands. Developers got used to making that. So it had to cost like some staff. And I'm not saying people quit, I'm just saying that some people might be less passionate about this new game. You know, maybe some developers just aren't liking this new game. Maybe some people didn't want a MOBA game. Like, they wanted to keep working on Borderlands. Maybe there was some tension, which is always a risk when you make a new IP. There could be some tension. Because it's a brand new investment, it's a brand new idea that not everyone might get along with, which is something that you have to take into consideration. So, what will Gearbox do in terms of new IPs? Well, my guess is that we won't see a new Gearbox IP for a long time. And that's probably because they're taking the safe bet and making another Borderlands game. And after that, we're probably going to see another Borderlands game. And by that time, it'll probably be around 2023, 2022, if we're lucky and they work that fast. So that's my guess. That's my guesstimated opinion based on all these factors that I've just spent the last like 10 minutes presenting to people. That Gearbox and their new IPs, we're probably not going to see very many new IPs for a while. We might see a Brothers in Arms game. We might see a Battleborn Season 2, or a new game for Battleborn. We're more than likely, though, to see more Borderlands. Because that seems to be what Gearbox wants to focus on right now, which makes sense. You know, it makes sense to go with what you've known, what you're familiar with, what gave you the extreme amount of success that you got in the first place. Heck, it's probably what I'm going to be doing most of the time here is researching Borderlands. Yeah, it seems to be what majority of the Gearbox Studio audience has been screaming at the top of their lungs for since the release of Battleborn, which is a little unfortunate, but I can understand where they're coming from. I mean, the studio that you love is not making the game that you love, so you have every right to be upset. Just, not as upset as the Borderlands community seems to be at Randy Pitchford every single move he makes. But personal opinion on that aside, I really don't think Gearbox is going to get into new territory for a while. Like, they dipped their foot in the water with Battleborn, tried to recreate the magic of Borderlands by, genre mashing again with MOBAs and first-person shooters, and they just got ripped apart. They had stiff competition, they were under-marketed. The fans of the original Borderlands games did not want to be a part of Battleborn for the most part. And all that put together just made for a very bad development experience. They kept their heads held high. And I'm very grateful as a Battleborn fan that they did that. They weren't very salty about how their game went. They were very positive about it. But they're not blind. They knew exactly what was happening. They knew why it was happening. Most likely they knew why it was happening. I hope they knew why it was happening so they don't repeat that mistake. But they dipped their toe in the water and it didn't work out for them. At least not to their hopes, as far as we know. I'm sure they didn't want a game that everyone laughs at. Nobody does. If I work on something, invest $40 million into it, which is a rough estimate for how much Battleborn would have cost in development costs. I really think that, if you weigh the pros and cons of a new game, and then you look at Gearbox's history with new games, you're not going to get a new game for a while. You're really not. And it's a bit unfortunate, too, because Gearbox is really capable of creating amazing things. And I would love to see them venture into new territory, maybe with Project 1v1. It's a small little project that they're doing right now, which isn't probably going to be kicking off until Borderlands is done. At least the next Borderlands game. That could be something. There's always hope that they could invest in new IPs, try to innovate like they've done in the past. But the chances of it happening very soon are very unlikely. I don't see Project 1v1 going anywhere for a long time. At least, by a long time, I mean about maybe 4 or 5 years. Maybe 3 or 4, assuming Borderlands comes out in 2020 or 2019. If it does come out in 2019, then expect Project 1v1 to come back as soon as they're done with DLC. Because I think the way that Gearbox wants to operate now is that they might want to do one Borderlands game, one new IP, or maybe not. Maybe Project 1v1 is just going to die. It's going to die in its infancy. That's hopefully not what's going to happen, because I'm invested in that a little bit. I want to see what happens with the 1v1 game, because I haven't seen one of those in a while. 1v1 has just kind of gone away. It's all team-based shooters now. Everything is team-based or single-player. And 1v1 isn't really a space that's been innovated much in a while. So I'd love to see Gearbox take a crack at that. But the chances of them putting investment money into Project 1v1, at least more than they are right now. Because right now, I believe they have a skeleton crew, which is just a handful of developers that are just keeping up with the amount of feedback they get, because it's a small project. It's the equivalent of an indie game right now with a AAA studio behind it. So that could happen. 1v1 could take off after the next Borderlands game. Or it could just kind of fade into obscurity, never to be really talked about again, like Project Titan was with Blizzard. I think that's what it was called, Project Titan. Until they split their development into two teams. One that made Overwatch, one that I think works on other games. So we don't really know what's going to happen in that space with new IPs, obviously until stuff is released. But I don't see any new IPs coming from Gearbox for a while because of the way that Battleborn went, which is a shame. Like, I love Battleborn, I love it to death. But I don't see any new IPs coming from Gearbox for a while. Which, isn't really a bad thing, because more people seem to want Gearbox to just focus on their one game. Yeah, their confidence right now is probably not at their best, because they put a lot into Battleborn. Like, it was a full game. It was a full game with all the bells and whistles. It had leveling up systems, it had single player, it had multiplayer, it had DLC, it had everything. It had literally everything you would expect from a Gearbox title, like a full Gearbox title. And it didn't go over well with the fans. So their confidence right now is probably like, okay, if we don't make another Borderlands game, we're going to go out of business. So that's probably their mindset right now, which is a little upsetting, considering, I'm a Battleborn fan myself. Mind you, with everyone being so obsessed with Battle Royale, they might have a chance to create something fresh. They might. I don't see them jumping on that trend, though. They've never really been one to jump on trends. They've been trend setters, not people that jump onto trends. Which is something I love about Gearbox. They're not, more than likely, not going to turn Battleborn into a Battle Royale game, just because those are popular. I mean, it's true. They could try to innovate in that space, in the Battle Royale game space, with something new. But honestly, I don't see them doing that. Oh, make something different from Battle Royale. Yeah, they're probably focusing on Borderlands right now, and they're probably going to keep focusing on Borderlands for a long time. At least for their next 2, maybe 3 games, which is a long time to completely ignore the possibility of making a new game. Because the way that Battleborn was first introduced was after they were done with Borderlands 2. They had all these ideas for characters laying around, and they just kind of went okay, well, what do we like? What games do we like? And then they said, oh, we like MOBAs. Well, why don't we just combine MOBAs and first-person shooters into a video game? It's the same line of thinking that they were doing whenever they said, hey, let's combine first-person shooters and RPGs. And then they just threw in Borderlands humor and, a new art style. And that's how they made Battleborn. And that was just their own creative thinking. That got them into making Battleborn. I don't know if stifling those creative ambitions is a good thing. Say they have all these ideas for characters laying around again, and they just say, well, why don't we just turn this into a new game? Well, you know what happened with the last game we made like that? It didn't turn out so well. Why don't we just put these in a drawer and forget about these ideas for a while? I could see that conversation happening a lot, and that sucks, because that's stifling creativity. But business is business. Gearbox Studios is a business. They're in the business of video game making. And if their products don't sell, then they have to change what they're selling. Otherwise, they'll go out of business, and we don't want that. I definitely don't want them to go out of business, because that would be very bad. So, in kind of conclusion here, I don't see Gearbox making any new titles for a long time. And that's probably because their confidence is down right now. Their morale probably isn't the best. But I've seen them, like, they're throwing parties right now. Literally right now, they're throwing not Halloween. Why did I say Halloween? That was like 2 months ago. They're throwing a Christmas party. And they're tweeting about it like they're having a good old time right now. They're winding down for the year. So, because usually, like, they kind of slow down around December and then they speed back up in January. So in January, February, March, that's when they really start to pick things up. Yeah, they're always in good spirits. They're always very positive about things. Like, I've spoken with Joe Kay and Jim Ferranda about morale and the workplace ethics at Gearbox, and it's very positive. Like, they're very community driven, which is very good. It's a very good thing to do. I personally agree with their approach, and I really like it. Gearbox, hire me. You didn't hear that. But yeah, the pros here, the pros do not outweigh the cons, at least when your confidence in making new games and how your audience is going to receive those games is very low and very kind of pessimistic. Like, oh, they didn't like our last game that was new, so maybe we should just stick to Borderlands for a while, maybe try again after a few more games? Maybe not. Which I personally don't like. Not that I don't want more Borderlands, because I love that game. I love that series, at least. But I love new stuff. I love when people try to innovate, when people make new things. Like, that's what drew people to Borderlands. It was something new. It was authentic. It was creative. It was awesome. And that's what drew me to Battleborn. It was something new, creative. It was awesome. So making the same thing over and over again is, like, even if it's something as creative as a video game, man, that's got to be taxing. It's just like, I don't know. I don't know how they operate, though. So we very well could see a new IP coming out of Gearbox right after the next Borderlands game. Maybe Project 1v1 is on their radar and they want to make it a new game. We just don't know. But my guess, my educated guess, and my kind of parting words for this broadcast is that Gearbox is not going to make any new IPs for a long time. At the very least, we're going to see 2 Borderlands games with full DLC, all the bells and whistles, before they even consider making another game that is not Borderlands. So Project 1v1 is probably going to be pushed off to the side. It might even be canceled in the next 4 to 5 years, because that's how long I see Gearbox making Borderlands. And who knows, they might even, like, just decide not to make new IPs after that and just make a Brothers in Arms game with their updated technology. Because I'd love to see a first-person shooter that isn't Borderlands from Gearbox. I'd love to see anything from them, quite frankly. But if it's just the same game over and over again, that gets a little boring, even if it's the most fun game in the universe. But in the end, it's up to them. We don't know. I don't know. That's just my guess. So don't hold me to it, because it's just my opinion. This is Dave, trying to figure out how to end this broadcast, because I don't remember how. Oh, there we go. Signing off.